Black men in America navigate a complex landscape that significantly influences their mental health and well-being. Hi, my name is Kevin James, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about my story in order to understand the reality that many Black men face with when it comes to their mental health and well-being. I want to come to this understanding of reality through my own journey, one marked by resilience, strength, and community, yet filled with unique challenges that deeply impact my mental health and sometimes my sense of oneself. When I think about mental health, it's not just about avoiding mental illness. It's about cultivating the idea of resilience, self-worth, and even emotional balance. For me, this has meant navigating a world where sometimes I'm often faced with many pressures and expectations, but these experiences have been known to shape my understanding of my own health in ways that go beyond just the clinical. They reach a part of my own identity and my own self. And so, through this project, we'll get to know a little bit about me. I'll examine a couple of different artifacts that I think are critical to our conversation, and ultimately talk about where do we go from here. I grew up in Flatbush, Brooklyn, the son of Haima and Parkinson James. I'm a middle child between two awesome sisters. Growing up in Brooklyn, I was surrounded by quite a vibrant and diverse community. It had its own rich history and culture, but Flatbush was a place where different worlds intersected and a primarily Caribbean community. I mean, it was here where I learned a lot of those values that I talked about: hard work, resilience, how community is important, and even faced with different challenges, how we're supposed to persevere. Thinking forward now, as a student here and now as an administrator at my institution for over 15 years, I've seen firsthand how these challenges manifest, particularly in academic settings. The pressures to succeed, to be twice as good, to navigate spaces where you're often the only one who looks like you. It takes a toll. And while we don't often talk about it, it can lead to moments of stress, anxiety, and even loneliness, to be quite honest. A lot of times, it felt as if I was the only one in the spaces that I was in. Growing up in Flatbush was quite interesting for me, because while I myself identified as a Black man, I often felt that my skin tone was a little lighter than some of my colleagues or some of my classmates, and there were moments where I was called out for not being Black enough, which leads me to my first artifact. During this course, I had decided to do a little bit of an earlier study on creating a social scholarship project where I actually showcase some of my own thoughts and feelings around it, which will be located here. You're not Black enough. Growing up, I would hear that statement quite a bit. You're an Oreo, or you are someone who, I don't know if you're Black. I got that quite a bit, especially in junior high school. And it's almost as if that statement almost makes it out that there's a singular Black experience. Now, I think that in my history, or at least over the past few years, it's quite clear that there are elements to being Black that many of us do share, and that we can't deny that. But I often would position that even a statement of "you're not Black enough" often ignores the idea that there's levels of intersectionality of being Black. That being Black and being male and female is a unique experience. That being Black and our different sexual orientations often equate into differences of our experiences. And in some cases, I think that is extremely important to not forget. So when I recall hearing about, being black and that I wasn't black enough, I did my own exploration and I found that I'm also Indigenous American. In fact, my mom is actually from Dominica and she is a descendant of the Carib tribe. So there's more to my identity than just being called black. In fact, there's so much more in terms of identity that I still want to explore. And so to singularize the black experience as one experience, I think can sometimes be slightly dangerous. But I think to a certain degree, it's important to understand the elements that connect us, but to also embrace those other elements that are, to be honest, make us beautiful and make us different. So, I want us to engage in a conversation on, have you ever heard of that statement? Like, that you're not black enough or you're not enough of something? And how did that make you feel? Where is your intersectionality? And ultimately, how does that make you grow as a person? In thinking back to those moments, especially in that first artifact, I can't help but want to pull up this one here, which is focused on talking about intersectionality. And Wallenby and colleagues in 2012 discussed the concept that when we think about the notion around intersectionality, there are various dilemmas that are really important to understanding how structural and positional inequalities are developed or brought up. Personally, when I talked about my story of being called not black enough or even an Oreo, it brought me feelings of being inadequate and isolated. And what's interesting is that those terminologies of becoming what is being black enough, there's a question about who is saying what is being black and what is not being black. And because of that, it can create the sense of, well, people belong in one circle while others belong in another. And so it's important that by recognizing these powerful forces within these particular societal relations, I think it can help us to better understand the unique mental health challenges that many Black men face, especially in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, cultural expectations have significantly shaped my mental health. And, growing up, I was often told to be strong, to embody resilience, and to almost never show weakness. And, while these expectations, especially when they came from my community, family life, they empowered me to persevere in adversity, but they also created systemic barriers to express my own vulnerability. In most cases, I didn't know how to seek help, I didn't know how to ask for it, and I felt that asking for help just showed weakness. And this pressure led to me embodying this concept, what African American epidemiologist and public health researcher Sherman James called John Henryism.
It's the skin you're in that matters. You are consciously aware of being a Black person in America. Your system responds to that. I was not surprised that the pandemic had the disparate effects that it did on African Americans. I am the originator of John Henryism theory, which posits that repeated hierarchical coping over years, over decades, with very difficult life circumstances can really cause damage to the cardiovascular system and then eventually lead to high blood pressure, heart attacks, and strokes. The John Henryism theory takes its name from the legend of John Henry, the steel driving man.
Some said he was born in Texas, some said he was born in Maine, But I don't give a damn where that poor boy was born. He was a steel driving man. Lord, now he was a steel driving man.
John Henry engaged in an epic battle against a newly invented steam drill, and he beat the machine. But he dropped dead after his victory from complete mental and physical exhaustion. You have today, in 21st century America, so many African Americans who are caught up in a John Henryism situation, who are faced with real adversity, deepening economic hardship, loss of jobs, loss of health insurance, threats to one's sense of personhood, one's sense of dignity. The stress is enormous, and people don't give up. That persistence, working twice as hard, over time can really impair multiple physiological systems. By the time they're in their 20s and 30s and 40s, they're already having things like high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity. Now along comes the pandemic, and they are susceptible because of these underlying conditions, and yet they have to try to make a living. That's the John Henderson situation. It's on display.
His research is quite fascinating because what it reflects is that there's this nature of pushing ourselves so hard against advantages or against all the disadvantages just to succeed. But it has a price. And in my case, it meant for me pushing myself to the brink in some situations, striving to conquer every challenge, and without acknowledging the toll it was taking on my mental and physical health. It's quite clear to me that this relentless pursuit of strength, ultimately underscores that there's this importance of us addressing both the individual and structural factors that do impact the mental well-being of Black men. So, my story in relation to this is, this past couple of years, I've gone through quite a number of different changes in my life. I started a business. I started to go back to school. I started to take on a new job and a new role. And all of these things were coming all at the same time. And I found myself in April of this past year struggling to function. And to be honest, I had my own version of a breakdown. And it took me some time to really pull myself out of that feeling. But I recognized that in those situations that I wasn't asking for all the help that I needed. And it became really challenging for me to really know how to process what I needed. The reality of it is that I was playing the role of John Henry. After that particular moment, I decided to seek some additional support and help. And so, I ended up working longer with my therapist. I've been seeing a therapist for so many years now. I ended up meeting with a nutritionist to help me rethink about my health diet. And I even met with and actually hired a personal trainer to help me to reach some of my own fitness and health goals as well. So I started pivoting more back into school and back into this and then into the summer semester. And beginning in session 1, there was a post that I looked at a little bit, but I didn't really respond to directly, but I was drawn to. And it was one by Tabitha Lim, who discussed about her mess in regards to the normalization of stress and emotional overwhelm among students, and really the cultural stigma in regards to mental health. One thing that came up was that in her process, she focused primarily on how to analyze this issue, which is wondering why students don't think therapy or talk to a counselor is a good thing. Why do they feel overwhelmed by it? And the reality of it is, it made me start to kind of go into my own thought processes around what does mental health look like for Black men. And part of me wanted to seek more information about this and wanted to learn for my own self, but to also talk about it in this capacity as well. So, after reading Tabitha's post and exploring how I was doing from my own struggles, I thought it would be important for me to really start my own journey to explore mental health for Black men and to really connected it from a deep seated recognition of the critical and often overlooked challenges that we normally face. So, as I delved through my own intersectionality between race, my gender, um, I started to really understand that there was this notion that there's societal expectations that are uniquely burdened by Black men, that impact our mental health, but also our relationship with others. Motley and colleagues in 2018 and Palmer and McMickens in 2024 talk about this a lot. And this realization was really amplified by not just listening to these stories, but also my own experiences and the stories that I started to really share. We were illustrating something critical, that sometimes we suffer in a level of silence. And so, inspired by all this, inspired by this concept of the struggle, I really wanted to embark on this social scholarship project through the course aimed at Black mental health. And to be honest, again, not really centered on my problem of practice, but I did feel that to a certain degree, this allowed us to create a project that was offering an alternative narrative. One that really acknowledges that there are complexities of mental health and really starts to foster what I like to refer to as the beginning of a healing process. My goal was ultimately to raise awareness among audiences about these issues. And when I mean by audiences, well, my target audience was, Black men between the ages of 21 to 40. My goal was to raise full awareness of those issues. And I wanted them to encourage folks to understand the urgency of mental health challenges while really prompting them to really think about ways to share this knowledge outward and to advocate for changes within Now, looking at this artifact from Dr. Rice on feedback from what I originally had submitted to him for the social scholarship project, he asked me some critical questions. Who's my audience? What is the message? And what do they want to do? And what do you want them to do with that message? And the truth is that these were all really good questions. The reality of it is that while I had a personal journey that I was going to talk about, I also recognized that my journey wasn't the only journey, and that it was important for me to present it in a way where there is a message that we can often talk about. So what came out of the social scholarship project was an Instagram account known as Resilient Resist. Resilient Resist was an Instagram account, or rather is an Instagram account, that is centered on supporting Black men through adversity by providing them with knowledge and insights on mental health awareness. The idea was that the platform was meant to be one that will connect to Black men between the ages of 21 to 40 and offer them a space where they can learn about mental health awareness and to offer them an opportunity to reflect, to discuss issues, and to give them a space where they can really have an opportunity to feel as if they're in a community ultimately. When I created the profile, I didn't realize this at the time, but I started to pour my heart into it. And what I mean by that is I started to pour into the profile and to offer my own personal story related to my own struggles with mental health. And in this case, I started to do an autoethnographical approach to my research here. And so Adams and colleagues define autoethnography as a research method that uses personal experiences to describe and interpret cultural texts, experiences, beliefs, and even practices. What's critical about this practice is that the researcher utilizes their own personal experiences to build a narrative or to build context around a social phenomenon that is happening. In this case, I used my own experiences around mental health challenges to really drive my own research and, more importantly, my own understanding, as well as the understanding for others, about what mental health struggles for Black men look like. The truth is that this approach made me a little nervous sometimes to put myself out there. I think that to a certain degree, and this reminds me of Wall in 2018, talks about that there's a problem with ethnography, and that lies in that there's a tension between what's personal and what's public, particularly understanding some of the ethical implications of really sharing these type of narratives. There's a voyeuristic aspect to to doing personal storytelling, where in some cases the audience is fascinated more with the details of the story than the actual deeper messages behind that. And so it's critically important to keep in mind that we want to make sure that when we have these stories out there, that we make sure that personal stories can often raise these ethical questions or concerns, and that it's important to find a way to reduce a culture of voyeurism and to ensure that there is a level of making sure that we don't reduce the human experiences to the level of just gossip. We want to make sure that we value the narratives that are being created, but also at the same time build a research base so that it creates a story beyond simply, here's my story. Now, I will give at least one example of this, is that, and it came from this particular profile. So in this particular instance, this is a clip from residency where I did let a personal story of mine go out, and I talked about the notion of going to therapy for over 10 years.
Great job. You have to really know people.
And if I could just add one thing to bounce off of that, one thing that I would also say is when we think about reflection can happen in different ways, right? Some of us have calm, some of us do it by ourselves, some of us have therapy. So to be honest, it's important to say that. No, but I'm going to be real here. And honestly, that is one thing that has helped me over the past, I'm going on 10 years now, going on therapy, and it's been really helpful to me to really think about thank you very much, appreciate that. And that has really helped me to sort of be able to not only be a better leader, but to understand what are my nuances, and more importantly, how those nuances affect others, right? And so I always encourage folks to really be open and honest with yourself in that process as well. I hope that answers all of your questions.
Look at the difference in enlightenment. He could say the word therapy, and I couldn't. It's generational.
Thanks, folks.
So, after developing Resilient Resist on Instagram and seeing the comments, seeing the connections, I had to question myself about the validity of the work that was in this autoethnographical approach. And the reality of it is that what was powerful about it, and what Cho and Trent in 2006 talk about, is that, validity in an autoethnographical approach is not about measuring necessarily accuracy in the traditional sense, but rather it's about the capacity of the narrative to really focus its attention on creating empathy, to provide contextual insights, and to really offer new ways of thinking about the subject matter. And the reality of it is that what I found through the comments I received on the platform and from the conversations I had with friends and colleagues from Johns Hopkins is that talking about my experiences was able to connect to others and to say that, yeah, your experiences is valid, and therefore there is validity in what you are saying. Because of that, it really creates value in itself. The more people hear about it, and the more do they believe and empathize with your story. The reality of it is that autoethnography in itself has a place whereby you're able to use it as a methodology of changing how one views about the world by offering a different one, but also to have that view validated. That also means that, I think in my opinion, which is where this may get a little funky, it also means that there is opportunities where some folks may not understand this. And I think in that capacity, while the autoethnographical approach can offer so much value, it can often sometimes it seems like it can hit brick walls based on what I have seen so far in readings. In essence, the validity is really achieved when the narrative is both illuminating to people and offer something more, and can also challenge the reader to really see the world differently through someone else's eyes. And what I found about, particularly with Resilient Resist, is that it encouraged people to look differently about the world. Some folks understood that world, some folks listened to it and was like, oh, I didn't know this. And in that case, it made me feel pretty proud of the work that I did. And so that's really something critical that came out of this. After doing this level of work throughout this course, I started to think about, looking at particular research into Black men in mental health and well-being, and started to really dig into the notion that a lot of the research that has been done through other methods can also find validity when we start to look at things from an autoethnographical approach. So, for example, Jones and colleagues in 2022 talked about the impact of mental health and well-being of Black men, college men after the COVID-19 pandemic. They also spoke about some of those different impacts that Black men in college experience, such as widespread distress, anxiety, the feeling of being lonely, impaired belonging on college campuses. And then you start to look and go deeper into other research that may have not taken that autoethnographical approach, like Herta in college in 2021, that elaborated that the idea that men of color need more academic support. It became clear to me that this approach helped me to not only validate their levels of research that was done prior, but also help to validate and empower my experiences as an individual. So, where do I go from here with this? And this is a really good question. The reality of it is that this project, this class I'm going to take with me forever, but more importantly, the work that I've done here in this class, I wish to continue it. I wish to take it from simply just Instagram account to do more and shift from being not only just a researcher, but for someone who can become an advocate. And what makes my role as an administrator at a local university critical is that in this program, I'm a researcher, but I'm also a practitioner. And so often than not, I can be that bridge that takes the research that I've done here, both from from various qualitative methods, including an autoethnographical approach, and really apply it for others. And so there's so much value that could be taken from this experience. And so I look forward to taking this methodology and extending it beyond simply this summer and seeing how I can apply it for other things in the future. Thank you.